Start recording the session. So the question we're going to do together is, you are a PM at Uber, design a smartwatch app, and here's the link to the interview question where we're going to be taking notes. So let's jump right in. This is a product design question. Who would like to guide me into what we're going to be doing first? Like, what's the first thing that we have to do here? All right, so I think S-Chan raised hand first. So if that's okay with you, Mark, I'll go with S-Chan, and then after that, maybe we'll come to you. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Bijan. So
Hi.
a few clarifying questions. So presumably this smartwatch app is for like the Uber. I guess what I'm trying to say is the current Uber app, does it run on a smartwatch? Is that why?
So yeah. So let's keep it simple and say we don't currently have a smartwatch app on Uber, right?
Okay. And so do we know if this app is targeted more at the drivers or for riders?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, so let's say that we're going to target actually, let me ask you that question. If you were the PM, you were the first PM hired for the smartwatch strategy.
Yeah.
Which one would you have built for?
I would do it for riders. I mean, I could make an argument for both, you see, because from the driver's side, it's a safety sort of feature because they can look down at their watch really easily. But I'm going to go with the rider's side of things, so that riders don't have to pull out their phones, don't risk being kind of like losing their phones. They can just keep it very much close. So I'm going to say it's for riders. And do we know why this has become a priority? What's prompted Uber to go in this direction?
It's just that we think that it's another interface that we need to have user interaction with. So yeah, it's just trying to make make the Uber ride experience, let's say, make it more pleasant.
Okay, cool. And in terms of so the business motivation is just to essentially to make sort of more optimal user experience. It's not being a challenge.
Yeah, so it's really about user experience. I think that's fair to assume that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna go to Mark. Go ahead, Mark. Curious to know what are your thoughts.
Are we developing the app? I just want to narrow the scope a bit. Are we developing the app for some specific platform? So maybe like Android or iOS to start?
Would it make any difference?
Yeah, we would narrow the scope. Yeah.
In what way? In what way would it narrow down? Like the reason I'm asking, yeah, go ahead.
Let's say there is like different notification systems. They are kind of similar, but a bit different. And let's say Android smartwatch, it's a bit different device than Apple Watch, right? So the design could be different and the features could be different.
Yes, I don't disagree with you, but I would say that given you have 30 minutes, during an interview, you're kind of staying very high level, right? You're probably not going to get into like the design details to the level that it matters, right? So if I was you, I would just like not even like think about it. I'd be like, okay, we need to have basically a smartwatch interface. Let's think about how to do it, right? Yeah. But these are good questions, and it's interesting. Like when we think about the context of, okay, during the 30 minutes, we want to we want to design a smartwatch app, right, for Uber. Like, let's just think about what can we get done in 30 minutes.
Okay.
It's a very limited time, so.
Then just I would love to ask about the users. Who are our users? So it's obviously riders, but maybe some specific user group.
Yes, but I would argue maybe that doesn't matter so much. Like you so here's why I would make that argument. I guess you could argue and say, yes, there are certain features that, let's say, more frequent writers would use than like less frequent writers, yes. But chances are, if you're launching an app for the first time, right, and it's like so basic, like it's going to include some like basic functionalities that are going to apply. Like, for example, let's say if I'm launching like Google search on a mobile device, right? Like whatever key functionality you're going to have is going to apply to pretty much like the Google user group. Like it's going to apply to a large group of users, right? Like my guess is that when you're launching something like this for the first time in like a new interface, you're going to go for like really common denominator features, right? And because you're going to go for common denominator features, chances are a lot of those segmentation is not as important. You know what I mean? Whereas if you're improving a product, so just like kind of playing the devil's advocate, and to be honest, like you could go down that path. You could say like, look, I'm going to focus on like the more frequent users. But my guess is that even if you do that, the features that you're going to end up selecting at the end of the day, it's still going to be relevant to every single user. Because it's going to be something around seeing how is the status of the car, like booking it and all that stuff. You're launching it for the first time. Yeah. So yeah, something to kind of
should we clarify the description of the product? I mean the smartwatch, the app for just to order Uber via smartwatch and to get notification about the location, and let's say get notification when it's arriving.
Got it. So what I like about what you just brought up here is you're kind of discussing what the smartwatch interface is all about, right? It's a really important thing that you're highlighting, actually, right? For me, this is where you're kind of talking about it from a product perspective. You're saying, okay, let's think about that. Like my understanding is that a smartwatch is mostly used for its strength in notification. The fact that the notifications are very passive, it's quick interaction, like usually one step, two step, which is very similar to how Uber works. So I really like how you brought up this topic because it's almost kind of helping us figure out what do you want to do if you have a really good notification system on your hand, rather than like, smartwatch is just like one form factor. But you're really kind of highlighting what's really the core technology of smartwatches that are being used pretty often, right? And then from there, you're going to start thinking about what sort of usability it could be providing to the Uber riders user experience. So thanks so much for highlighting that. I think that's a really good point. I'm going to quickly write this down. So you said like, smartwatch, what's interesting about it. For example, notifications, people seem to use it a lot, and it kind of seems like it's been one of those things that's been developed as like part of the user experience of like an Apple Watch and all that stuff. So, all right, let's continue. Eschan, I can see you. I think you raised your hand. Was there anything you wanted to highlight? And I kind of talked too long and didn't give you a chance to speak.
No, that's fine. I was just going to add that definitely I think because Uber's earnings have been really great this last quarter, I don't see that revenue is an issue for them. They might just be with this ploy trying to sort of retain their users more. And I was also just going to point out that with the hybrid model of going to work now, a lot more, and petrol prices being so high, a lot more people are actually eschewing travel. It's sort of driving their own cars and going and getting back to using Uber. So there's definitely been more of a push for commuters to now use the service.
Got it. Okay, fair enough. And I'm asking this question because I think it's very critical for us during the 30 minutes to be very efficient. I'm curious to know the financials of Uber. Does that have an impact on the smartwatch design?
No, but I was just going to say that that's not a problem
Yeah,
that they're going to solve, that they're going to be focusing.
right.
It's very much more about in retention.
Got it. Got it. Like, yeah,
Um,
that's fair enough. Yeah. You're not doing this, to reduce costs or anything like that. And I mean, it's not going to really reduce costs in any ways,
yeah.
because the cost is pretty much like on the user's battery life, basically, right? On device's battery life. So that's fair. Okay, sounds good. So let's kind of continue moving on. I'm curious to know, what do we want to do next? We talked a little bit about what the smartwatch is all about, right? I think that's a very important piece of the puzzle, because you could also think about this as question being asked, like, what would you build with like AI, or like what would you build with this like really cool technology that can recognize a video's context and then turn it into a song, for example. Like what I'm trying to say is, like, the question, yes, it says design an Uber app for the smartwatch, but really what it's kind of saying is, like, what can Uber do with the smartwatch app, right? That's one way that we can also think about it from a product perspective. Yeah, that's totally fine. I would say, to be honest, like, I think personally, like, when I'm asked a question like this, I would just like kind of quickly ask a couple of clarification questions like you guys did. I'll talk about what the smartwatch is all about, where the technology is today, who's using it today, right? Because these things are matter that kind of relate to the Uber side. And then I'll go straight into the Uber experience, and then think about pain points that could be relevant to the smartwatch in a way that the smartwatch could basically solve some unique problems. So what do we do next? Like, what's the next thing that we want to do here?
That's what I would love to address, the pain points. What kind of pain points of users, just and describe
Got
it.
it.
That's
Would
super
we
important.
wouldn't we identify the user segments that we're going to?
As we agreed, it's not
Yeah.
really important.
Well,
So what?
within
Yeah.
riders, you have different segments. You have commuters, you have casual users,
Agree.
have people who are
Yeah.
using it for like uh, special events, luxury users who will, so
Yeah.
I think that this is a feature that is going to appeal more to, sorry, I think the capabilities of the smart are going to appeal to kind of users who are a lot more sophisticated, who are kind of early adopters of technology, who are busy people essentially, and need to have that mobility. People who are always on the go, like commuters.
Got it. Okay, cool. So I don't mind doing this. I'll say here a particular user segment, commuters, right? But what I would say is, let's come back to it later and then see if this is really having like a major impact on the actual product that we're going to design. I'm just reading quickly Talon's note. We can define what capabilities smartwatch provide and where we can leverage them in rider journey. Yes, this is kind of what I think we should do. Totally agree with you, Talon. Curious to know, Tyrone, are you interested in sharing with us what those capabilities of smartwatch are? Or, yeah, what are your thoughts here? Is this something you would be interested in, or do you prefer that other people go?
Yeah, I can give it a shot.
Sure, go ahead.
So how I look at it is that a smartwatch, the screen is very small, so we have a very less footprint to show a lot of details or get something out of it. Uh, and as well as there's just one or two buttons which provide us additional functionality. So from a smartwatch point of view, it's just a small screen and a few buttons to figure out what can be done. And so how I see is that what we can do is what we can leverage these things for. Maybe just showing, just giving a one-click option for a booking experience. I mean, what I'm trying to see is, can we solve any of the problem statements in our journey, whether booking and post-booking.
So one thing I would say, Tarun, though, I think that you're discussing the smartwatch interface, right? Which you're doing it in a pretty good way. Like you talked about the reality of the size of it, which kind of limits the type of activities you can have, right? I would say before you go into the solutioning part, right? Ideally, you want to think about the user journey of an Uber rider, right? And we can think about a particular segment if you want. But let's just talk about the pain point, right? And the reason I would suggest us talking about the pain points is when we take that approach, sometimes there are other solutions that become available to us as alternatives because we're not really focused on solving a problem rather than kind of using a solution that's a little bit obvious and kind of comes to our mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, understood. Yeah, got it.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's think a little bit about the rider journey. So I'm interested in knowing, like, how you would describe the rider journey.
Okay. So the rider journey will become. I'll define the high level phases: search and discovery, booking, arrival, and post booking. Okay. So what I mean by search and discovery, basically, you might be opening up your app to find if there's a cab available nearby or not, and try booking for it. Okay. That is the search and discovery phase. Then the booking is once you have booked the cab, you're waiting for the book to, agree with the pricing and the selection of right type of vehicle. Once you agree on that booking phase, you come to the screen where the vehicle is coming towards you, okay, and you're tracking how much time do you have before the cab arrives. And the last part is once the ride is done, just sharing your feedback, and if there's a payment process in place, you might do that payment, is what I'll say. Yeah, so this is like a very high level user journey which we'll have with respect to the Uber rider.
Got it. Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting that. And I really like how you kind of talked about these kind of 4 big buckets that are part of the user journey from a very, very high level. It's interesting how when we think about it this way, we can kind of guess which part of the journey would be more relevant to the interface. What do you think about that? Is that fair to say? Like when you think about it this way right now, what are your thoughts? Where would you want to focus
on? Sure. So given the smaller interface capabilities, I think I'll choose a stage of the process flow which has minimal interaction. So that is something where I can see is the arrival journey, and the post booking experience is something we can try show on the watch, is what I can think of. Basically, let's say you have booked the cab, you can just keep your phone back in your pocket and the watch will take over, showing you the ETA time and maybe the rough location of the vehicle. Okay, that is one way to look at so sorry, again I went into the solutioning part of it. I should have defined
yeah and it's fine. It's sometimes hard to stick to the problem discovery part. To be honest, I used to struggle with this a lot. remember I had this one PM role many years ago, and my boss used to tell me, Bijan, stop solutioning. Like, think about the problem. And it was like a really interesting learning experience for me that I was told that. So that's totally fine. Let me go around the room. Thank you so much. I'm curious to know what other people think. I think you kind of set us up for a good kind of path right now. We talked a little bit about the different kind of parts of the user journey. This is where we talk a little bit about ideally pain points that we think are important. Go ahead, Eschan. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
So one pain point is, I think I mentioned it earlier, but the risk of losing your phone, dropping it, having it, stolen out of your hand as you're waiting to catch your Uber. So security essentially is a problem when you're using your app out on the streets in order to catch cab. The other is let me think. I had another one, but I've forgotten. The other is more like weather. If it's raining and you've got your phone up the display, you haven't got your umbrella.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So it's easier to not easy to take out the phone, right? Out the phone and use it, right? That's fair enough. Okay, that sounds good. And like I think it kind of like sounds like from what we're discussing here, a lot of the features, correct me if I'm wrong, from what you're describing, it seems like the smartwatch technology could be more relevant to the search and discovery phase rather than booking, arrival, or drop off. Is that fair? Like, I mean, if you wanted to kind of decide where we're going to initially focus on.
I think it's more general. It's just because it's just the order of operations throughout the whole app. Definitely from a notification standpoint, it's a lot easier to miss a notification on your smartphone than it is on your wrist.
So it's, I guess I write that as a pain point, right? Because what you're saying, and that's a really good point, it's possible that you miss an Uber notification, right, on your phone, right? Okay, cool. What else can we think about? By the way, your comment here also made me realize one thing we didn't really ask here, which I mean, it's okay, but I mean, if we ask, I think it's really a good question. Is like, or at least like we can say that as a clarification and say something like, "Hey, I'm going to assume that we have 50, we have like 10 engineers, for example, in our team, and we're trying to ship something within 6 months, right?" Just kind of having an idea of like, what sort of resources we have. But I would say it's also okay if I don't really ask that question in this particular case, because like for an MVP, I think as a PM, regardless of like how much resources you have, chances are the scope of what you're going to launch initially is not going to be very different. You're going to try to get something out really quickly, which is still going to be some sort of an MVP. So thank you so much for highlighting that it's possible that you miss an Uber notification, so that's why you don't have it. Can you think of any other pain point here that is worth highlighting?
I do have another pain point, but this is more specific to just catching an Uber in general in the US.
Okay.
And that is because the license plates on US vehicles are not on the front of the car, and in Europe they are. You can always identify your car when it pulls up, whereas it's a little bit more tricky in the US. You have to go behind the vehicle to see, and you have to match up the car with the what it looks like in the app. So this always creates a little bit of friction when first getting into your Uber.
Got it. Okay, cool. I will write it because I think what I like about this pain point that you highlighted is that I have no idea how we could potentially address this with a phone, with a smartwatch, but that's good. Like that's really showing that you're so focused on the problem statement, but perhaps you have an idea of like how you could address this through the smartwatch, and I'm going to write that for now, and we'll find the relevancy of it later. So because of lack of license plate in the front of the car, it's sometimes hard to confirm, to make sure that you're getting into the right car, right?
Another pain point is, and this is just as you know, a woman sometimes, you know, when I travel on my own, if my safety is always topmost of my mind, and you know, within the Uber app you have a function to essentially alert someone, or to even sort of, I think there's like a sort of code red facility.
Got it. That's a really good point. That's a
Yeah.
really good point.
And it's a little bit more unwieldy when you have like, you know, someone really psychopathic driving your Uber to get your phone out and kind of make that call.
Yeah, so
I'm impressed.
Sorry?
No, this is a very
I'm
good
impressed.
idea.
This is great points, you know, just I'm impressed.
Yeah, it's a very good point to bring up. And you know, what I like about it is that we're kind of thinking about these problems in the context of, you know, they exist today, but we can think about potential ways also to address them through the advantages of like smartwatches. And it kind of goes back to what Tarun was saying earlier, which is like, the interface is very limited, like the real estate is short, like you can easily kind of see it. So that's very good. That's very good, right? And curious to know, is there anything else, Mark, maybe you would like to also add, or should we just like continue to go to the next step? Okay, I'm going to assume that Mark doesn't have anything to add, so I will move on to the next part. You guys can hear me,
because
right?
it was mentioned already about the
Got it.
Thank you.
Cool. I mean, one thing you could potentially also like highlight, and I guess it's like about the fact that today, if you want to book an Uber, there's like, actually, no, I wouldn't highlight that.
You know, just one specific pain point I have, like when you searching for Uber, and sometimes it's not comfortable to wear the phone, you have a lot of luggage, and you need to find the spot of the pickup, and you need to find it on the map. So with the watch, you kind of hands-free, right? So that's, sometimes it's a really pain in the neck, especially somewhere in Boston or New York, I don't know, like, so it's in big cities. Sometimes there are multiple spots for pickup and you don't know which the level, and you walk in and, you know, and you have a lot of luggage and you need to watch the map, and it's a catastrophe.
Got it. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. All right, sounds good. So, okay, we wrote a few pain points. What do we do next? Like, what's the next step that we want to take? I mean, there's two ways we can go about this here. I always tell people, like, one way is like we just go to the kind of product idea phase. We start thinking about like some of the high level ideas for what the initial version would look like. Or another way is you kind of say, I'm going to focus on these pain points because I think they're more severe. I'm personally, to be honest, more interested in just like jumping right into like the solutioning part, especially in a case like here where we're starting something from scratch and we have an idea of like what the interface is going to look like. I think it's okay as long as you still do that like kind of prioritization. Later, you're still achieving your objective, which is build something that has basically focus on like the highest ROI functionalities and features, right? So as long as we kind of do that prioritization at some point, we're okay. All right, so what do we want to do here next? Like, is it okay if I just like kind of say product ideas and like we kind of go to the next step? Like, let's think about like some of the key, you know, parts of this smartwatch app. I would actually call this features more than product ideas because we already know the product is going to be a smartwatch app, right? So let's think about like the features that we think are necessary, you know, for this like kind of MVP of smartwatch app. Who's interested in guiding me?
You know, just first feature, I would definitely think about, if we were talking about, and I'm very curious about security feature, I would make sure that the Uber app works independently of the phone, which is not the case with many apps. So that's kind of, for me, a really important feature if we're like focused on the risk and this kind of code red.
What do you mean Uber app works independently from your phone?
Some features,
can you
like
explain?
If your phone turned off, they cannot operate without phone.
Got it. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, phone,
I guess,
like the smartwatch app can operate.
Yeah, another feature, I don't know, like is to make big notifications, since one of the biggest parts, like, it's notification in our list of the issues. So notifications should be big, you know, just visible, so, and comfortable. I mean,
got it. So I'm just gonna kind of like jump a little bit further and say, like, it's for Uber arrival, exact location, right? Things like that. Okay, cool. What else?
I just would like to say, you know, great point, Mark. In terms of, you know, notifications, is perhaps being a little more personalized. Say a pattern that matches your Uber driver's interface, whatever that be. You know, they have those special lights now that kind of flash in the dashboard when they arrive. So maybe having something that's more customized to you, which shows up in the driver's kind of indicator when they I can't remember.
That's such a smart idea.
Wow.
Have you guys have seen that though, right? When you've got into an Uber.
I know what you're talking about, but now that you described it, I'm like, holy shit, that's such a great idea.
Yeah. So something like
All
that.
right. So you're talking about basically turn the screen of the device into a notification for the driver, right?
Yeah, but so the rider has their own customized pattern, and it flashes in the sort of in the lighting. You know, the drivers have their personalized kind of light indicator in the dashboard, so it flashes up there, so you don't ever have to look at their license plate, or
they can find you.
you know immediately that that's your Uber, and they don't have to
Wow,
name. So
I mean, it works well at nighttime.
Yeah,
that's kind of obvious, and it's so genius.
About that, but it just helps a lot, you know.
Cool. Sounds good. I'm glad that we thought about this. Let's talk about more ideas. What else do we think that we could talk about here? What other features can we add here? I think we already got like a couple very interesting ones. It's kind of obvious.
So when you like push the code red or something like this, so it's how to say, so it's clear communication with it connects with some, I don't know, like police department or somebody else.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
okay, fair enough.
I think you have, you know, a really good value add. This is a really good
exactly
premium service where you have an Uber hotline that's just dedicated to safety. They're almost like you would, you know, sort of their own exclusive 999 line, you know, and you just push your red and your driver's car gets.
I would buy the like watch only for that feature. Only for that, you know. I don't have any.
Oh, that's like, imagine, I mean, especially if you have like a child or something, right?
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about. Let's say you buy for your kids, so I'll definitely buy this watch just for that feature.
Yeah, I mean,
we're costing Mark a few $100s in this session here.
I mean, what would be great is, like, you know, the Uber hotline notifies the police patrol
Yeah.
car, the nearest police patrol car, and
Right.
obviously the driver is trackable because their pictures in the app. And even if they're not trackable, the rider is, by virtue of being connected to the system, and so then they get picked up by the nearest cop, basically. And
and one thing to kind of also highlight is that I think the problem that we're solving here, yes, it's the emergency part, but this currently exists in mobile, right? But we're basically, what we're doing is we're solving the convenience aspect of it, right? And I think it's important for us to kind of remember that, because basically all Uber is doing is just like building an interface to an existing technology, right? And that's I think that's what's cool about it. So I'm gonna write down rate the ride experience post ride as well. I think that's an interesting one, and this is really kind of coming back to that concept of convenience, right? Like the fact that with the smartwatch, you can actually do certain things because the interface is like right in your hand, like very small, couple buttons presented. You can have much better experiences for certain types of activities, right? Great. So let's get one more item and then move on to the next step. Just so that we can have the time to do the prioritization. What's one more idea that we can think about? Anybody interested? I mean, we should probably have the basic, I guess, let me ask you guys that question. Like, should we be able to book like a car ride through the smartwatch app, or do we think it's not necessary? It's interesting. We thought of so many good ideas that, they on their own, they could be an app, but I'm wondering, like, should we have that feature too?
It's hard to get a map onto your smartphone. I mean, sorry,
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
You definitely
right?
need
That's
that
a very good point.
when you're booking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe if you had got like augmented reality goggles,
Right.
at this stage, I don't think you could.
Or maybe it's good for like favorites, like going to favorite locations.
Yeah, quick. And again, then this goes back to the commuter rider who is always going the same destination every morning.
Yes, but I would also argue that even the non-commuters usually have like favorite locations.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So for example, like people go back and forth between their like siblings' houses and their own houses, or they go to a gym and come back, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that the idea that you're really kind of solving here is like a quick booking for like favorite locations, right? So quick booking for favorite locations. So it's kind of like you open the smartwatch app, you press the button, and it books, right? That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we thought about a bunch of features, right? I'm curious to know, what do we do next? Like, what's the next thing we should do?
So prioritization based on some criteria.
Yeah, right. So I'm curious to know, Chan, like, how would you, think about evaluating these options that are provided to us? Like, we got 6 really interesting ideas. How would you maybe? I mean, from a prioritization perspective, I think it's kind of at a very high level. Like, we PMs know you got to think about the impact on the user and the effort of implementation. To keep things simple, let's assume that the effort of implementation is more or less the same for all of them. And I think it is kind of the same, at least at the level that we're discussing, because we're not really digging into a lot of the complexities underneath. So with that in mind, can you kind of describe to us, like, what do you think about each of these ideas from an impact to the user perspective?
And so by impact, are we talking about reach as well, or just about, severity, like essentially how much of a, because I think we also have to look at the goal as to like how all of them are going to improve user experience, but are we to sort of push the needle in terms of innovation on user experience? Is that what
Got
we're
it.
looking for?
Really good question. So generally, I think, if you were the PM for this particular, division of Uber, right? Reality is you would think about reach, right? Now you can still say, I'm just like looking at it from an impact perspective, and you could say the impact, I would argue, is like kind of minimal, because it's only going to apply to like certain number, like very small group of users, right? So in reality, you could break this impact into like kind of multiple scores and then like multiply them to each other. Like that's, for example, like one of the things that I do is not only that I think about the impact to the user, I think about the likelihood of the impact to the user, because I know that I'm under a lot of assumptions.
Right.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you the other thing I would also look at is I would look at ease ease of copying the feature, like, or rather how much differentiation I can make as compared to my competitors by implementing this feature. And for that reason, I would go for the option to call Uber Hotline for emergency situation with the service element to it, because it's going to be harder for a Lyft or any of my other competitors to basically fling up a copycat feature like that, because it involves a service element and all of that.
Yes, I agree with you. If Uber was starting, that service today, but I think Uber already has the like emergency hotline, like within the app, right? So if that's the case, if the functionality is already there, and I'm guessing like Lyft already has it too, then the only thing you're still doing is like you're really just like building the interface.
True.
You know what I mean? And that's, to be honest, that's the reality of software services, is like everything is copyable, right? However, I would say at the same time, Uber and Lyft are solving very different problems. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but or if that's kind of obvious, but I think Uber and Lyft solve very different problems. It just happens that they compete a lot in the one case of like moving, like Uber is really focused on moving objects from point A to point B, whereas Lyft is focused on making it easier for humans to go from point A to point B, right? Like you don't see like Lyft food, for example, as much. But you will see like Lyft, even buses, or like Lyft public transportation, or Lyft bike ride, and all those things. So yeah. Okay, so I went a little bit off tangent. My apologies. Go ahead, Mark. Did you want to say something?
I would also.
Then we want to come back to.
I would also focus on the how hard it is to implement the feature. So obviously, just prioritize basically value to the customer and how hard it's to implement. So
I agree with you.
Two columns and just quickly go like hard, medium, low. So I guess my guesstimation here. I guess this kind of feature that Sean offered, just with the recognition of the driver, the cab, and the client would have a great success, and I guess for the user, because it's kind of something new and something just really desirable, and I guess it's not that hard to implement.
Okay.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here and say that
Yeah.
I think that that feature is probably going to be a lot more successful in the US, where we have these constraints with the license plate. And I don't think it will be as successful in Europe and other countries where you can identify that. So for that reason, I would probably not prioritize it.
I would say sometimes there are a lot of dirt in Europe, and sometimes, you know, just you're so tired from the flight. So it's so you're gonna be so pleased with this feature even in Europe.
Yeah. And then I'm also going to say that in terms of reach, the safety aspect might be more of a concern to you know, to women traveling on their own, maybe. So it might not be as universal a problem. It's certainly, you know, it's going to impact solo riders and not groups. So maybe that feature is not going to have as much traction in terms of reach.
Agree. Yes.
So let me actually ask my question in a slightly different way. S-Chan, what do you think are the top three of these six in terms of impact to the user, and why?
So the top three or the top two?
The top three.
Okay, so I mean, again, it's going back to this question of impact versus reach.
Okay. Everything. Assume that when I say impact, so on your side, you're thinking about value. You know, the weight of the impact and the reach of the impact. You know what I mean? Everything combined.
Okay, because I mean, in terms of reach, as identified, those two features, like they have a really they are impactful. They are, you know, highly impactful. They're certainly driving, you know, innovation forward. And but in terms of reach, it's like there's certain user groups who may not really find it so impactful to themselves. So they're not so universal. If we're looking at the quick booking for favorite locations, or even, you know, that too as well is going to be it's probably going to have more reach, but it's not as cutting edge or impactful. Certainly rate the ride experience post ride, just and you know, notifications, those are table stakes features which you would expect to have on the smartphone app as well. So I would say those are probably low priority in terms of impact, because you would expect those there. So you know, I'm going to say, just because of what it would do for I guess the user experience, the whole thing, our goal, which is really to make a very impactful user experience, I would go back to the dual notification, the sort of personalized notification between the driver and the rider. I would go back to that, because
so this would be one of them. And then what are the other two?
Then the other two, because we're looking at, you know, really improving and really making an impactful user experience, I would probably do you know, I would actually do because what goes hand in hand with that is around the notifications. Okay, so the one before, I think you would need to do both of those together, and then, you know, I just would like to have four. But I can only have three. Probably quick booking for favorite locations.
Got it. Quick booking. So you're really like kind of thinking about make it easier for people to book, especially when they go between like frequent locations. Make it easier for them to kind of see what's happening. And the reason notification is important here is because it's a problem in the mobile device, right? It does exist today, not easily solvable. And turning the screen. And, you know, I think to be honest, like this is kind of a situation where you would be having like kind of discussions with another PM. Another PM might say, I disagree with you. And then they're kind of trying to kind of play and see how you would argue for your position. At the end of the day, like there's no clear right answer. And, you know, one could argue that, oh, like, you know, the hotline is a lot more important, or somebody could argue and say, you know, the rating is very important because like we could see significant increase in the number of ratings that we receive because they're all more convenient. So it's going to go back to how you argue it, right? And how you build your case. But I think overall here, you did a pretty good job of like kind of explaining, you know, why you think, you know, those 3 features are the most important ones. So thanks so much for highlighting that. And I'm just going to quickly say, select it, and then write the ones that you highlighted. Cool. Well, this is great. And to be honest, if you had more time, I think it would have been good to also go over like what the actual interface would look like for an MVP, right? But we're just about time, so we wouldn't be able to do that. Thanks so much for coming to today's session. Hope you all enjoyed it. Like I mentioned, I'm going to take a couple of weeks off at least, and then it's holiday season, so I will kind of come back and continue doing the sessions next year. I'll be back in Toronto or like at work in about 2 weeks, but I'm thinking I wouldn't do any sessions until next year.
I'll be back.
yeah, I'll be back. Yeah.
See you in Vancouver.
yeah. Hope to see you in Vancouver. And to be